So, hello everyone. This is your book club team. I'm Carolyn and Tina and Sally.
Hi.
Wendy could not be with us today, but we wanted to share with you the next 6 books for the JourneyWoman book club. And this was based on the voting that you all have done over the last few weeks, and we want to thank you for that. But we're here to announce the first 6 books, and well, not the first, but the next 6 books, I should say, and just give you a little insight into what they're about. So we're going to start with the very first one, which captured the most votes in our survey, and it's by Lisa C. And it's called Lady Tan's Circle of Women. And I think I'm going to speak to this one, right? This was, I thought, a fabulous book. It's set in China, back in, I'll have to check the dates, but back in the 1500s, and takes you back to 1469. And it's just a wonderful story, a wonderful read by Lisa C. And Lisa C has written many other books, like The Island of Sea Women, always about Chinese American families and, women's empowerment. So I just thought it was a beautiful, beautiful book to read. It is a little long, so you'll want to get it early and get started on it. So that's our first book. Our second book.
I think it's a great choice because she's so good at capturing the feel of China and the different cultures within it. So I think it's a really good choice.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And
yeah,
the
I'm
next
looking
book
forward to the read.
Is The Dictionary of Lost Words. And Sally, I think you're going to speak to this one.
Yeah, so the Dictionary of Lost Words is set in Oxford, in England. It's on Goodreads. The blurb for the book starts with, in 1901, the word bondmaid was discovered missing from the Oxford English Dictionary. This is the story of the girl who stole it. And that, of course, captured me right away. So it's a book with a very English feel, I thought. And it's set in Oxford among men of letters. And they really are men of letters, because the protagonist, Esme, only actually gets a look in on this great Oxford Dictionary project because her father is one of the lexicographers in the team. It is a plot-driven novel, but it also gets one thinking about how different words have different status and how often the status is associated with whether the word describes the world of men or the world of women. And it has a lot of great landmarks of Oxford, from the Ashmolean Museum to the Eagle and Child, which is a pub that many great literary figures have drunk in the past, from Tolkien to C.S. Lewis, to even features in the Inspector Morse detective stories for those of us who like a good English police procedural. So I think that'll be a really good read to take us to England.
I have to admit, this one I found a little hard to get into, but I'm really glad that I stuck with it because it is a beautiful story. It's a beautiful book. And it's also set against the backdrop of women's suffrage movements, which I found also really relevant and interesting. So yeah, much to my surprise, I really ended up loving this book. It's a great book.
Sometimes, when you get beyond the first bit and you think, oh, I'm not sure if this is for me, and then you get into it, actually it can often be better than you thought it would be.
Yeah, well, even just to go back to Lady Tan's, I mean, this is all about binding feet and all kinds of things that are just so foreign to me anyways. And I was just, I guess, enthralled by the way that that she was able to tell these stories. So sometimes these books, when they really take us out of our comfort zone, we learn so much.
I know, I love the learning you get sometimes.
Our
I was
third
lucky
book.
to. Sorry, sorry, Carolyn. I was saying I was lucky to hear the author speak at a writers' festival recently. She's English by birth, but she lives in Australia. And there's a sequel coming out, which I'm really excited about. So I'm looking forward to rereading it. It's a few years since I've read The Dictionary of Lost Words, and yeah, it'll be great to have a reread.
That's great. Our third book is called The Widows of Malabar Hill, and it is set in India. And Tina, I think this was one of your picks.
It is. It is a book I read a while ago, and it stayed with me. And so I think a book that stays with you often has something about it that is worth kind of passing on. It's set in 1920s Bombay, and it is inspired by the first woman to become a solicitor in India, because the culture and still can be today, is very, very male. And so a woman cleaving her way through is quite extraordinary. And she takes on the case of 3 women who were married to the same man, living together. He's died, and there is quite a mystery around his death. And somebody else has been shunted in to kind of look after them. They have to remain in the women's quarters because they're in Purda, and they have to observe a series, a few days or a few months of mourning. And it's just wonderful the way she picks up 1920s Bombay, because it's it's the period of the Raj, but it's very much from the Indian perspective. And in fact, she has them going to, or she has her Parveen, who is the solicitor, going to a bun bar, which in fact we visited when we were in Bombay. So it just felt, I could hear the footsteps past in that book, and it's full of colour, and it's very warm colour. So that's why I thought it was a good choice.
Lovely.
I love this book too. It has so much texture in the architecture, in the food, in the clothing. There are some dark themes in it, some traditions that I wasn't aware of that I found a little confronting. At the same time, though, it has that gorgeous, easy read feel of a golden age mystery.
Yeah.
Even though it's a completely, we're used to golden age mysteries taking place, real sort of Agatha Christie books in the UK in a locked room somewhere, but and hers is out in the city with an amazing feel for that city, but there was something about that feel that made it just a thoroughly entertaining read, as well as having all these themes that one can think about.
And it stays with you. And I think, I love the cover of this. In fact, I love the cover of all the ones we've picked today. I think they're all very striking.
If you say that, people will think we judge these books by their covers, Tina.
Don't, but it just so happens. But maybe we're going into a period of really, really good book cover design, which is,
Good design, yes.
Interesting. I believe our next book is Death Child.
And that again is me. And this is a book that is set in Vietnam. Now, we have got it at Trip Fiction as our book of the month for September. And the reason I very much like this book is because it sets the context of the American War. And it picks several people and different perspectives, and takes you through from the 1960s to more or less present day, looking at it from the Vietnamese point of view. A couple of sisters became bar girls. It looks at their story. It looks at an American point of view, and he looks back on the time in Vietnam and the horror of it for everybody involved. And then there's also a young man whose father was an Afro-American. And he was then sort of isolated in his community because they were very anti I guess, people of that origin. And it just sets out his story as well. And it's just, it filled in a few gaps. In fact, what I did with this book is I read the book and I also listened to it as an audio book. So if I was out walking, I'd, listen to it as an audio book and then pick up where I'd left off. And that was a really, really interesting exercise, particularly because the audiobook has the Vietnamese in it, and you can kind of hear that, how things are pronounced, and it just made it a very colourful and rounded book for me.
Oh, lovely.
Sounds great.
Our fifth book is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. And I still can't say that name, but I will get it better over time. Fikry.
It is quite a sort of tongue twister, isn't it?
For me.
And then just to complicate matters, this is one of those books that has actually been released under 2 different names, which I hadn't realized until I was looking up at it last night. It's both as The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry and also as The Collected Works of A.J. Fikry. And I wish publishers would stop doing this. It gets really confusing. But this is a fabulous book. It's set on a fictional island off Massachusetts. Kirkus Reviews says, think Nantucket. And it's set in a bookstore And it has a book club, so you know what's not to like. It's the protagonist is the owner of the bookstore, and he is a man who is struggling to fit his life back together around his grief, when he finds his family extended in a very surprising way. And I realized that, you know, grief is a strong theme in this book, and that might make it sound like a really heavy tome of a story, but in fact it is the complete opposite. It is a humorous, optimistic page turner of a book, and one that is filled with so much love. I absolutely adored it. And also, it's a shorter read. We've had a few really long reads recently. So it's quite fun to read something that's short and very sweet at the moment. There's a review in the library journal, and I loved their quote, which said that the storied life of A.J. Fikry reminds us all exactly why we read and why we love. So I hope our book club members will love it as much as I did.
Beautiful.
Such a good combination. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last book we have chosen, so this is our 6th book, and this will take us into 2024, is called The Crimson Thread by Kate Forsyth. And it is set in Crete.
Yes, so this is one that I read very recently in preparation for my own trip to Crete, which is the largest island in Greece. When I was reading the book, I was very drawn to the characters and the 20th century parallels that the author drew in this, you know, wartime love story, but the parallels with Greek mythology, and particularly with the story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And these parallels and links, you know, they're from a female perspective. They're from the perspective of Ariadne, and definitely do not place Theseus in the center of the story, and certainly not as a hero. So for those who might not be familiar with the myth, in ancient Greek legends, it was Ariadne who gave a crimson thread to Theseus so he could find his way out of the labyrinth after slaying the Minotaur. But it was also Ariadne who was brutally betrayed by Theseus and abandoned on the island of Naxos to die. So although there is a strong thread of romance through the novel, which is not usually my thing, this romance takes place in the setting of Crete's remarkable history in World War II and the resistance at that time. And that's a history I had never heard about before, and one that really came alive in the pages of this book. My strongest feelings about the novel actually came when I traveled to Crete a few weeks after reading it, and had to do a last-minute complete reshuffle of my itinerary, because I had just assumed that I would be able to catch a bus from a point on the eastern side of the island around the south to my next destination, and hadn't realized, no, I would have to hug the north coast all the way to Chania in the west, and then cross the mountains. And as I was reshuffling and rejigging and rebooking things, I thought, why did I just not pay attention to the landscape in this novel? Because it said it. It said the mountains are hard to cross. So yeah, no, it was a good book and a really strong connection to both the historical and the physical landscape of Crete.
Well, I think these are 6 great books, exciting books. You know, this is, I think we're going into our 5th year of our book club now. And every month the books get better and better. So I want to thank Tina, Wendy, and Sally for helping us pull this together. And our book clubs are the 3rd Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern. And I know there are some women who want to also join these calls, but cannot because you're in different geographies. Maybe next year we'll be able to start another call in another time zone. But in the meantime, we do put them all on our YouTube channel so that you can watch them later. So anyways, here's to our next 6 books. Thank you, ladies.
Which is great.
Thank you,
Look forward to
Karen.
reading them.
Yes, indeed.